Hi, I'm Mark Carvin, Managing Director of the Midwest Minority Think Tank, and welcome to Brother to Brother Talk. We are here to have a dialogue with you regarding the events that are happening around the nation and most specifically that are affecting the Black community and how we can move forward with solutions rather than just lament over how we got here or why we're here and what is prohibiting us or who is prohibiting us from moving forward. But I wanted to spend some time tonight. We talked about this over a number of sessions and police brutality, the protests. I want to look at and the protest laws or anti-protest laws that have emerged. I just want to take a recap and look at the protests, and we call it a protest overview this evening. And I want to look at certain cities and certain instances that are things that have unfolded since George Floyd's death on May 25th of this year. And we're looking at what has taken place since then. The protests across the country. It started out with the protests were against police brutality. The protests, the narrative then moved from police brutality to protesters. And now it has moved from protesters to specific groups that are now so-called anti-American or anarchists or anti-government. And so we've lost the narrative in the role. It doesn't matter how it got hijacked, but the narrative has gotten hijacked, and the police brutality protests that began with George Floyd's death have somehow gotten misconstrued deliberately through manipulation of the narrative. So now we're just talking about protests, and the laws are emerging almost consistently that are anti-protesters. So it's taking away the one strength that the mass population has always been able to employ, their freedom of speech and their objection to abuse or any action that is discriminatory. And so I want to take a look at how the protests have gotten to this point and where we are now and what the next steps are going to be coming out of this. So when we come back, we're going to take an overview of the protests that are going on since George Floyd's death on May 25th and how the momentum has switched and moved, the narrative has changed. We'll be right back. This is Brother to Brother Talk. We will take a break and we'll be right back. I'm Mark Carvin, Managing Director of the Midwest Minority Think Tank. We'll be back with more solution-driven dialogue on Brother to Brother Talk. BrandonBeef.com. The Midwest Minority Think Tank presents live The Value of Your Vote, post-election analysis with your host Mark Carvin and co-host Leslie Wilson with correspondent Ernestine Newington. Wednesday, November 18, 2020 on YouTube/Mark 9 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time. You do not wish to miss The Value of Your Vote, post-election analysis. Welcome back to Brother to Brother Talk, and we're looking at the subject this evening of protest overview. Let's look at Portland, Oregon. Protests have been going on continuously since May 26th, and 100 arrests of protesters by federal authority. We're not talking about the state of Oregon. We're not talking about the municipal law enforcement of the city of Portland. Over 100 arrests of protesters by federal authorities, and 74 of those have been charged with federal crimes. And you need to know that there is no parole system in the federal system. So whatever time you get, that's what you have to do. Minus some good days off, which would be a little like more like 10 months and 15 days that you would do for each year. But the point is, protesters are going out and not aware that they can come back with a federal felony charge as a result of participating uh, in protest. And I charge that those who are organizing protests should make people aware of this. And we're going to discuss our views on uh, the alternative and new strategy, because a felony pretty much writes off a person's career. And a lot of the protesters are young college students, young people who are finding their way. And to go out to protest what you signify or signal the signal that injustice or a threat to your future ends up really costing you your future. And so, yeah, look at this: over 100 people arrested in the protests in Portland, Oregon alone, and 74 of them have been charged with federal crimes. There's something else going on as it relates to uh, the freedom of speech. There's been a lot of violence against the journalists. The U.S. Press Freedom Tracker recorded at least 49 arrests. We're talking about journalists being arrested, not the protesters now. We're talking about journalists who are there on the scene reporting what has taken place, and 49 reporters have been arrested. And then listen to this: 192 assaults on the journalists who have been reporting the arrest, the unrest. And out of that 192 assaults, 160 assaults against journalists has been at the hands of the police. And in 42 separate incidents, equipment was damaged during the protests. Wow. Yeah. 192 assaults against the journalists reporting the news, 49 arrests of journalists reporting the news. 160 of those assaults were by the police, and 42 incidents of destroying equipment and damaging equipment of the news reporting team. We have a lot to unwind and uncover and realistically approach as it comes to protests and what is taking place. So much violence against the news media who are there to report the news. Columbia, South Carolina, and Charleston, South Carolina. The protester who were accused of starting fires or inciting riots in Columbia, South Carolina, and Charleston, South Carolina, now face federal charges. And some of them are getting federal charges on top of state charges. You go to a protest and come away with a 10, 15, 20-year sentence, state and federal. Our people need to be aware of what is taking place when they go out to participate in protest. Uh, it's somewhat mind-boggling to think that our young people can get caught up not even being the one who threw the Molotov cocktail, not being the one who lit the fire, but can be the one who bear the brunt because they were involved in what is considered rioting by mass groups. Let me say something to the organizers of these protests. If there's no security personnel present to come to the aid of someone who is injured during a protest that turns into a riot, then that individual can pursue a claim against the organizer of the protest for failing to maintain a safe environment. Before you go out to be this activist, this community activist, you need to understand the law of the land. You become liable. You can become liable for anyone who is injured and you did not provide a safe environment for them to protest. These are rapid changes taking place around us, and we need to be aware of this, both from the perspective of what the law is, the perspective, the responsibility when you call others to follow you. There's one new law, proposed law. It's not a law yet, but it's a proposed bill drafted by the governor of Florida, Governor Ron DeSantis. He wants to expand his state's laws on the state's stand your ground law. If that wasn't hideous enough, he's proposing that people be allowed to shoot looters. Yes, the governor is drafting legislation that will allow people to shoot looters. And this was reported by the Miami Herald. He wants an anti-mob legislation that for the purpose of expanding forcible felonies under Florida's self-defense law, including criminal mischief that causes any interruption or impairment of business. A felony just for impairing business. Now, not only is he proposing to expand the stand your ground law so that you can shoot looters, but the draft explicitly mentioned rioters and looters, allowing citizens to use force against people who might be looting within 500 feet of a violent, disorderly assembly. That's outside your business, 500 feet away. If someone is looting, you can then shoot that looter. He's also proposing to make it a third-degree felony to block traffic during a protest. Third-degree felony, 5-year sentence for blocking traffic. And if a driver accidentally kills someone or injures a protester, he's offered immunity. So in other words, if a person driving a vehicle drives over or through a crowd of protesters, that individual has immunity no matter what happens to that individual that is struck by his vehicle. Wow, this is the governor of Florida drafting this bill. Anyone, he wants to increase the penalty for anyone who's involved in violent or disorderly assembly. He says he wants to make this the strongest pro-law enforcement, anti-rioting, anti-looting legislation anywhere in the country. And he's threatening to withhold funding from any local government that cut police funding. That's the governor of Florida. We're going to take another break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about a new strategy for protesters. This is Brother to Brother Talk. We will take a break and we'll be right back. I'm Mark Carvin-Knowles, Managing Director of the Midwest Minority Think Tank. We'll be back with more solution-driven dialogue on Brother to Brother Talk.
Beef.com.
Midwest Minority Think Tank presents live The Value of Your Vote, post-election analysis with your host Mark Carvin-Knowles and co-host Leslie Wilson with correspondent Ernestine Newington. Wednesday, November 18, 2020 on YouTube/Marcos, 9 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time. You do not wish to miss The Value of Your Vote, post-election analysis. Welcome back to Brother to Brother Talk. I'm your host, Mark Carvin-Knowles, Managing Director of Midwest Minority Think Tank, and we want to talk about new strategies for protesters, and we got to have a new approach to it because the laws are rapidly changing that can ruin people's future who have a well-meaning attitude. I'm not talking about now. People who are deliberately destroying people's property, but people who are getting caught up, the protesters who mean well, and watching the protests get hijacked by nefarious groups or nefarious organizations. And as a result, people's lives are being destroyed and hampered from advancement because stringent anti-protest laws now can bring you a federal charge as well as increased penalties through the court system as a result of getting a felony. What we need to do and see done initially is educating, training, and understanding. Educating the persons who would be leaders to what the laws are, and then those leaders, when they're planning organization, educating the participants that would become protesters in a demonstration as to what they can do and cannot do, training in how to react in terms of not allowing themselves to be drawn into looting, into burning, and protecting one another from getting caught up in conspiracies of those who would hijack a peaceful movement. And also understanding what the consequences are, what they're undertaking, and that this is not just some random act of joining the crowd, but understanding that they have a purpose behind the action that they're taking, because there are serious consequences. Things can go totally wrong, and if we cannot afford to keep putting our young people in harm's way without educating, training, and them having the understanding of what is taking place. That's one. Second, they need to be prepared for a long-term action. Change does not come overnight. So it's not about seeing how many people can we get together for one evening or one demonstration as if that's going to change it. No, you have to be in preparation mode for long-term action. So then the protesters has to make a commitment until we resolve, until the resolution is resolved, and it's not just something that is occurring as a spur of the moment or an emotional action. It's not a reactionary. It cannot just be reactionary. It cannot be after the protest just cannot be as a reactionary area to some uh, uh, incident that violates someone. Yes, that's part of it, but the protest has to be prepared for preparation for long-term action until we get the desired response. Because without getting the desired response, it's a constant cycle of responding to an adversity with an outpouring, outburst of emotion, and then everybody gets calmed down, and we go back and wait for the next incident, and then comes the outpouring again. No, uh, in position of leadership, if you're bringing people together to engage in change, and you're talking about being an agent of change, it has to be preparation for long-term action. Third, make demands known, not just get people together and say, let's march and we're going to have a lot. No, make demands known so that each person engaged in the protest, each person engaged in a march, each person would know why they are there, what their purpose is. And when the organizers make the demands known, not only to the individual, but to where are you going with the protest, so that you can present your demand to some entity, some individual who can meet those demands, and so that everyone that's participating in the protest knows from the beginning what it is that they are marching for, what they have been a part of, so that they can, if asked, they can articulate why they are participating. We cannot continually ask people to be participatory in something that can cause them harm without them knowing why they're doing and why they're engaged and why they're involved. We also need to move to direct protest to target resolution. Direct the protest to target resolution, not direct the protest to have a big crowd, a big number, and then hope that something is going to change because a lot of people are saying that. No, direct your protest to target resolution. It's not enough to say we were out in the streets in great numbers. Look at these great numbers. It can't last. Direct the protest to target resolution. And number 5, we need to be going to state capitals rather than to the nation capital. With the new laws and the expense sometimes that's tied into gathering people who need help the most to make a trek across the country to make a protest. If the same number of people stayed in their own cities, in their own states, and just went to their own state capital, and everybody was saying the same thing, you could get something done nationally because the people are standing up. What's the difference between a million people being spread out over 50 state capitals saying the same thing than a million people gathered together with 100,000 different scenarios and coming away with nothing? That brings me to number 6, the unity message as opposed to mass numbers. When we are speaking brother to brother and we're speaking a unity message as opposed to generic thoughts, but we're having concrete demands made known, then that becomes the unity message. It's not just enough to say we need to become unified, we need to march together in unity. No, let's unify our demands. That becomes the message. Let the demands become the message, and then the demand becomes the mass force. And finally, engaging the people, non-reliance on polls or the media. Engaging the people by making it known to the people why we're protesting, what the demands are, who we are going to take the demands to, what entity, what individual, and we're going to stay there and with the protest until that is resolved. And there's non-reliance on polls and media for what we are seeking. They cannot define nor hijack the narrative. If you control the narrative, you retain the power of your movement. You retain the power of your protest when you retain the narrative. Therefore, when we're engaging the people, we're engaging the people so that there's a non-reliance on external forces, external polls, or the media. I'm Mark Carbonell, Managing Director of the Midwest Minority Think Tank. Thank you for joining us this evening for Brother to Brother Talk, as we're looking at an overview, a protest overview, and a new strategy, and what it is that we must unfold in order to get and attract people to commit to bringing about change and being change agents. Mark Carbonell here with Midwest Minority Think Tank and Brother to Brother Talk. I've enjoyed being with you this evening, and I wanted to just take a moment to invite you to the November 18th session of the Value of Your Vote. Let me play this clip and I'll be right back. The Midwest Minority Think Tank presents live The Value of Your Vote, post-election analysis with your host Mark Carbonell and co-host Leslie Wilson with correspondent Ernestine Newton. Wednesday, November 18, 2020 on YouTube/Marcos, 9 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time. You do not wish to miss The Value of Your Vote, post-election analysis. Once again, I'm Mark Carbonell, Managing Director of the Midwest Minority Think Tank, and your host to Brother to Brother Talk. Thank you for joining us this evening. We will be back next week, and we'll be continuing with solution-driven dialogue. Brother to Brother Talk.